Hello, my name is Chris Douglas, and today's video is entitled How to Write a Research Paper. Please like and subscribe after watching this video. Let's assume you're already comfortable with writing a presentation or a paper that you've done for high school or college English classes, or perhaps you had to give some sort of presentation at your job. Today we're going to focus on how to write a research paper specifically for presenting in a Masonic Lodge or some other body. But many of the techniques you will learn here can certainly be applied in an educational or business format as well. The first thing that you need to come up with is a topic. One of the benefits of having written research papers for many years is I've already compiled a long list of topics. I recommend that on your smartphone you should have, using Samsung Notes or some other notes-based app on your phone, you should have a file set aside specifically for research topics. At any time during the day, if you read something, if you hear something, if something occurs to you and you say, hey, that's something I'd like to write about, then you immediately stop, open up your notes app, and write down just the topic. That's all you have to do. So let's say you're starting from scratch. You don't have a backlog of topics already at your disposal. What you do is something we call brainstorming. Here is how brainstorming works. And pay attention to this technique. We'll use it several times within this video. So first of all, what you do is get yourself a nice legal pad or letter pad, yellow, white, doesn't matter, and a pen. Find yourself a nice, quiet room with no distractions, no television, no music, just you and the notepad. Set a timer for 5 minutes. Take a minute to think what it is I'm writing about. What am I writing about? All you're trying to do is get ideas on paper. And the first one is coming up with a topic. So you need to think, what is something that I have a question about in Masonry? What is something I've seen that I really don't understand? And I want to get an answer to the question, like, what do the columns mean? Or why do the deacons carry staffs? You set your timer for 5 minutes, you start it, and you immediately start writing. Now, you do not correct, you do not spell check, you do not write out or scribble out or change anything. You just simply write as quickly as you can. And if you have to go to another sheet, flip it over and get on the next sheet. Write every single thought that comes to your mind for 5 minutes straight, with no editing, no corrections, no stopping. Don't worry if you make duplicates. You'll clean that up later. When the timer goes off, finish the one you're writing and stop. Then take a minute, take a breath, go through and read your list the first time. Okay, so when you are reading your list through for the first time, here is where you're allowed to correct spelling errors. And if you thought you only wrote down a word or two and it wasn't clear, you should remember what you write. So you can cross it out and write it out as a full phrase, like Grand Lodges in Europe or whatever it is. You want a complete thought for each item. If you notice there are duplications, then go ahead and cross off the duplications. But when you're done reading through the first time, take all of those and write them onto a second sheet of paper neatly. Then take all those topics and enter them into, say, Word or some other format, whatever you have on your computer to keep track of things. It can be Excel. Read through all of them carefully and decide what is the one you're going to write about today. And now you have your topic. Okay, now we've established that we have a topic. So we're going to get into the actual meat of what the paper is going to be about, and we're going to return to brainstorming. Now, it's going to be up to you. You're going to have to see what works for you. If you want to do some brainstorming first and then go and do some research, or if you want to go and read about the subject, especially with something you're not familiar with at all, and then at some point stop and do the brainstorming to help organize your thoughts. You'll find some combination of the two, what works for you. But let's say in this case, I already kind of know what I'm talking about, so I'm going to want to do the brainstorming to get started. So again, we grab our handy white letter pad and our pen, and we sit down again, and we set the timer for 5 minutes, right? And you already picked your topic. Let's say your topic is Grand Lodges of France, which is a paper I've already written. What do you want to talk about within this paper? Say that in your mind. What do I want to talk about in this paper? Set the timer for 5 minutes, and then just write down ideas. Very short, no more than 3 or 4 words, not a complete sentence. And again, we don't care at all about formatting or editing or spelling or duplicates. We don't care. It's to get the ideas out of your brain and onto the piece of paper. That's why we use paper and not a typewriter or a Word or some other software where you're at a keyboard. It's much too slow, and you're much more likely to stop and correct your errors. When you're writing, you don't care how sloppy it is. You don't care about spelling mistakes. It's the best way to get it out of your head and onto a piece of paper. So paper works best. So take 5 minutes and do nothing but brainstorm, do nothing but write down anything you can think of is what I want to cover in this paper. I want to talk about Paris. I want to talk about famous Masons. I want to talk about origins. I want to talk about the influence of religion. I want to talk to the influence of the crown on Masonry, whatever. Anything related to the topic. And when the timer stops, finish the point you're on, and then put down the paper, take a breather, sit for a minute, clear your head, and then pick up the paper again. And yes, my dog is behind me getting comfortable. So you're going to, after taking a breather, you're going to pick up the paper, you're going to take whatever sheets you had written, tear them off, get a fresh sheet of paper, and you're going to go item by item in the sheets you've already written on, and you're going to rewrite them neatly onto new paper. This is important. You're going to write each idea down. And I want to clarify, if I said, I want to talk about X, I want to talk about Y, you don't actually write the words I want to talk about. You simply write French kings, Paris, whatever. You know, you're writing the topic, not I want to talk about in front of each one. So you're going to transcribe every single line from the written pages to a fresh new page or multiple pages, and that's okay. If you want to make 2 columns on the same page to say paper, I don't really care. It's up to you. But write each idea, correct any spelling errors on the new piece of paper. Make it a clean thought. That's why you do it on a new page. Make it a clean thought. If you kind of write 2 words or 3 words that are kind of jumbled, but you knew what you meant, then write it neatly on the new piece of paper. And as you write down each idea, cross it off on the old one. If you see there are deletions, just cross off the second one. If they're duplications, rather, cross off the second one. Now you have a clean list, maybe 1 page, maybe 2 pages, of every unique idea that you want to write about for your paper. Now, stop, take a breather again, clear your head, read through each topic on your new sheet, and think about what kind of category that topic would fit under. And remember, it's only an idea, like famous French Masons. That's enough of an idea, famous French Masons. You don't have to list any. You're going to go look up who they are. You don't have to know them off the top of your head. If you can think of a famous one, then by all means write them down. But the idea is just to get to the idea on a piece of paper. You don't have to have the answers. It's just simply questions that you're asking when you're writing it down. So as you look at each one on the sheet of paper, think of what category it would fall under. And if you don't know, skip that one and keep going. As you go along, you'll say, oh, I see a category, geography. You know, you're talking about cities, you're talking about regions, you're talking about other countries. So your category is geography or places or something like that. It doesn't matter. The category is not necessarily going to go in your paper. You just need a category to organize these things together. So read through the list, maybe more than once if you have to, assign a category to every single topic. Once that's done, take a breather again. Now, take those sheets of paper off, take a brand new sheet, and at this point, you want to move to Excel and just type it into Excel, that's fine. I prefer to write it down still because I'm going to end up crossing off some of them as I go. So pick the first category for the first topic. So the topic is people, another one is places, and another one is history, whatever. Write down people, draw a line under it, and go down the list, and every single topic that fit with the category of people, write it down on the new sheet under people, cross it off. When you're done, if you have things that don't fit under any category, or if you have a category with like 2 things on it, unless they're really, really important, or at that moment you think, wait a minute, and you think of 2 or 3 more things to add for that category, if you really don't have enough to flesh out a category with 3 or more items, remember, in outlining in English composition, 3 or more things. Always A, B, and C. Always numeral 1, 2, and 3. Always 3 topics. If you don't have 3 subtopics, you don't break it up into subtopics. That's the rule. So you've got everything organized into categories, and you find something that's not quite a category and really doesn't have any entries, cross those things off. It's okay. And by the way, at this point, in just doing this brainstorming, if you say, wow, I want to go write a paper about this guy specifically because he sounds interesting, good. Go to your other list of topics, add him there, then forget about it. You're committed to the topic you're writing on. Focus on that. Now you've got your list of categories. Now you're going to stop. If you haven't put them in Excel already, put them in Excel. And I say Excel is easier than Word to move groups of things around, so by all use Excel. But whatever software works for you is fine. Now you've got all your categories. You put them together and you say, okay, I've got 4 solid categories of everything. So go through and read them slowly, look at all of the categories and all of the topics, and at this point you can say, okay, realistically, is that too many things? Am I going in too many directions? You can kind of weed the list a little at this point, but you may want to stop and do the research now. But at this point, you now have solid topics, solidly organized into categories. You've made a really good start. Okay, now you've got your topics. You already have a good idea of what your paper is going to look like. This helps stimulate your mind so when you go and do the research, you already have an idea of what it is you're looking for. And don't worry if your end product, you end up rejecting half of those topics. It's okay. Maybe you can't find any information about the person you wanted to write about. It's okay. You can just leave it out. So now we need to get into the actual research. I do a lot of my research online just because it's easier. I don't have to drive to a library and I don't have to dig through a lot of books. Ideally, when you get to writing more intensive and more deeply researched papers, you're going to want multiple sources and you're going to want to be reading more books. But there's a lot of information to be gathered online from websites, from Wikipedia. Yes, I said it, from Wikipedia and from other sources. Grand Lodge websites typically have a great deal of information. You just have to know where to look. But ideally, when you're researching, you want to find multiple sources to confirm a particular point, especially if it seems in any way controversial and it looks like it may have been written from a biased standpoint. So you're going to have to use your own judgment on that. So the easiest way to get kick-started, believe it or not, is actually with Wikipedia. So you just do it in Google search, take the first topic in your list, and just do a Google search for that topic. Now, I want to say something about bookmarks before we talk more about research. Notice I'm here on a Wikipedia page. What I do when I use Chrome, Chrome's my favorite, but you can use Edge or whatever software browser you want, is I create a research folder. And under each one of these is a folder for each topic I'm currently researching. So here's the cryptic degrees. So as you go through, every time you read a page and there's anything at all about this page that you want to use in your paper, simply bookmark it under this folder. And you know, there's going to be some cases where once I organized it, I make subfolders. So here is France. I talked about the GLNF, the GODF, other Grand Lodges, Supreme Councils. I created subfolders once I started going. But you notice for this one, for cryptic degrees, I put them all under one folder. Now you begin the research in earnest. And like I said, it's perfectly fine to start with Wikipedia. Not necessarily because of the content there, although you can certainly quote from Wikipedia if it seems like it's a reliable and non-controversial source. Half of the stuff on Wikipedia is perfectly reliable, like the history of a given Grand Lodge, or say the number of record albums by a particular artist. Most of that's pretty factually based. You start staring at anything political or anything in the least bit controversial, and remember that any idiot can edit a Wikipedia page. So you really can't trust, if the subject matter is in any way controversial, you can't trust what you're reading on Wikipedia. But when it's treated like an encyclopedia type entry, like the origin dates of a particular Grand Lodge, and it started here and it spread to here and all like this, these were the people involved, for the most part that can be trusted. But again, follow your instincts. If it seems like something is controversial, then you may want to find multiple sources to rely on. Wikipedia is full of links to other articles, both within Wikipedia and other websites. That's why it's an excellent jumping off point. Skim through that page. If it looks like there's any good content, or there are links to other pages that potentially have content, bookmark it. Don't read the article in depth. Just kind of skim it and say, yes or no, I can use this. Then follow each one of the links, every single link on the page. If that page looks useful, skim it and bookmark it. Keep doing this until you've looked at least 20 or 30 different pages and you think you're going to have enough content to write your paper. Then go back carefully and reread every single web page. Now you can start taking notes. If you want to quote verbatim from a web page, that's fine, but you have to make sure that you actually quote, put it in quotes within your paper, as reported in such and such website, and then you put it in a block in your paper and list verbatim what they said. If you want to summarize, you can use 3 dots and all, and you can say, you know, take snippets here and there. But you need to give attribution if you're quoting it word for word. But you can read through an article, get the gist of it, and rewrite it in your own words, and that's okay. But you do need to note all of your sources, and you should list a bibliography at the end of your paper and list the sources. Yes, my dog has shifted to another place in the room. He likes to do that with his bed, so you can follow the dancing dog as this video progresses. So now that you've read through all of your pages, it's time to get this organized into an actual paper. This is where actual hard work begins. You need to sit down, look at all of your topics again, and see how much that corresponds with the research that you've gathered. You may find that there are additional things to flesh out certain categories. You may find that you found a whole bunch of information about one particular part that's more important, and there's some things you didn't find any information on, and that's okay. If you feel the need to sit down and brainstorm again with all the information you gathered, feel free. If you just want to rewrite the categories and rearrange the topics based on what you've read, that's fine too. But here's the thing. If you go back and look, if you consider all of the information that you've read about, and now you have sources, you can go back and you've taken some notes. Now you have a much better idea in your head about what your paper is going to be about. So it's time to organize. And the categories should have got you most of the way there. So maybe it's better to start with a fresh piece of paper and a new list of each category, and then write about the topics that you have information on. Okay? So now you can build an outline. You should already be familiar with how to build an outline, but assuming you aren't, you've established you have 3 or 4 major categories for your paper. You have found all of these subtopics within each category, and you found research, you found information that backs up what you want to write about. So now you can put all of those points once again under each category, arrange them and however you want to arrange them. And this is one of the things you need to decide when you're writing your paper. Is it going to be topic driven? Is it going to be, I'm going to talk about these sort of things, and then these sort of things, and then these sort of things? Or is it going to be more chronological? A lot of time if you're writing about history, you can say, I'm going to start with the earliest events that happened, and I'm going to end with the latest events that happened. Whatever works for you. Usually the information you've gathered kind of tells you how you're going to write your paper. But now you begin to write your paper in earnest. And that's going to be up to you. You're going to want to put things in your own words. But you have this outline that you can follow and say, okay, for this part of the paper, I'm going to write specifically about these things. So write the paper out, go back and reread your notes, reread the articles that you had, get additional information, and just flesh it out. Put it into paragraphs. Try to have a topic sentence at the start of each paragraph, all the stuff you learned in English composition class. Organize it so that it flows. This is the most critical thing about your paper. It has to flow. You are not presenting this as a doctoral thesis. There are plenty of college classes you can take that tell you how to write a paper for a doctoral thesis. This is meant to be an educational and informational, but yet entertaining paper that you're going to be reading out loud in front of a lodge room. You have to be interesting. It has to flow. I have seen several times where I'm reading a paper and suddenly the author takes a jump to a totally unrelated subject and they're not tied together in any way. And I almost get whiplash from adjusting from one to another. It's even worse when you're hearing it in person because you're trying to follow along and the person is saying something and they suddenly stop and talk about something completely different and you're lost and it takes you a little bit to catch up. If you were reading the paper, you could always back up to the previous paragraph and read it again and try to figure out why they made this leap. But when you're listening, you really can't rewind like you can't say with this video. If I don't make sense, you can always back up 20 seconds and play it again and see where I jump from one place to another or why my dog moved from one side of the room to the other. But you can rewind and figure out what happened. When you're given a live talk, the audience can't do that. So the most important thing to remember is it needs to flow. You need to write each sentence so it makes sense with the sentence that it follows. And then the audience can follow the thread of your intellectual journey. Because otherwise you're going to leave them behind and they're not going to enjoy it and they may just tune you out altogether. Now, you finish your first draft. This is critical when you're editing a draft. Print it out on paper. Print it out on paper and either you or someone you trust who can edit for you take a big red pen and read through it and make corrections. And they're looking for spelling mistakes, they're looking for punctuation and grammar errors, but have someone edit it with a red pen and then sit down again with the written copy that's been edited and re-edit it in Word or whatever it is you've chosen to written it in. And there are times when I write papers where I take entire sections and I put little indicators at the top and bottom of a section and say, move this here. Because I find when I'm writing it, I often take a whole paragraph or a sentence or even pages and move them from one place to another because, again, I'm worried about flow. Every time you finish an edit, stop, take a break, leave it alone maybe for an hour or even a day, come back to it and read it again. And when you reread it another time after you finish editing, pay attention to the flow. Does this topic belong in the paragraph it's in? Does this paragraph belong with an earlier or a later part in the paper? You want to arrange it so everything logically makes sense and one idea flows into the next. So when you're done, the whole thing flows. So you've edited several times, you've found all the spelling mistakes, you've corrected all the grammatical errors. When you finish with a paper and you think it's absolutely perfect and ready to go, take a break. Wait at least a day, maybe a couple days. Read the thing over cold and pretend as if you're reading it for the first time and ask yourself, does it make sense? If need be, print it out or email it to someone else and let them read it and say, does this make sense? Do you like it? And then accept their feedback. Now you've got a good working paper. Final bit of advice, because I know this video is already running longer than I planned. When you present it in the lodge, take your time. No one has read this paper in advance. Read it slowly. Put some emotion into your voice. When you're reading the paper, put emotion into it. Make people understand what it is that you're trying to communicate. Pause. Add emphasis on particular points that you want people to remember about this paper. Use little vocal tricks like that to make sure people stop if you've been droning on and say, oh, this is important. I need to listen to this. I need to pay attention. And by all means, slow it down. You have plenty of time. It is better that people hear you and comprehend it than that you read it quickly just to get it over with. They won't enjoy it. They won't take anything home from it. And you do not have to memorize it. I've written several papers I've given multiple times, and I feel comfortable enough that I can pretty much deliver them from memory, and I just kind of look down at the paper as I'm going. But don't expect to memorize the thing. It's not ritual. If you're comfortable standing behind a podium, stand behind the podium. If you want to walk out in the audience, which I did the last time I gave a talk, then go by all means stand out and talk to the lodge room. Another useful thing when you're giving the paper is make sure that you make eye contact with different people around the room. That may be harder if you're new at public speaking. If you want to focus on the portrait of Washington over the senior warden's chair and stare at it the whole time, that's okay. People will forgive you if you're staring at a blank spot somewhere in the room. I hope this has been useful to you. I hope you have found something and within this video that helps you become better at writing your first paper, or if it's your 10th paper and you just needed some pointers. I think every Mason should be a research Mason and present papers. It helps you understand more about the craft, makes you a better Mason, makes you a better officer, and just makes you more well-rounded. And you learn, after you've been giving research papers for a time, you pick up more and you relate more when you encounter ordinary things within the lodge, within a degree. You know there's a deeper meaning behind it, and you draw more out of it because you have done the research. So that's all I have for now. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe this video. I hope to hear your research paper one day soon.